Good afternoon, children. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, March 23rd. And we are at chapter 4 of Mr. Popper's Penguins. To summarize, just in case you haven't read or listened to me read chapters 1, 2, and 3 of Mr. Popper's Penguins, let me give you a quick summary of what we know from the book already. We have main characters, Mr. Popper and his wife, and then also have his two children, Janie and Bill and Janie. And then we also have the Admiral, who's a scientist in the South Pole. And we basically learned that Mr. Popper was kind of bored in his town of Stillwater. He's a painter. And we also learned that he wished to be a scientist and wished to travel the world. And he's always interested in going to the North Pole or South Pole. And he's always interested in penguins. So he kept in contact with this admiral, a scientist in the South Pole. And he got a surprise in chapter 3. They actually sent him a live penguin from the South Pole as a pet for him at his house. And so in chapter 3, we learned about how he's taking care of the penguin, and the penguin's pretty intelligent, and that he makes a lot of noise. And he's learning basically how to become a pet inside his house. So in chapter 4, I'm going to read you that chapter now. Captain Cook is what it's called. Oh, that's right. We learned at the end of chapter 3 that they called him Cook. So Captain Cook. So they decided on a name for the penguin, and his name is Captain Cook. So maybe being that this chapter is called Captain Cook, we learn a little bit more about Captain Cook. Let's find out. Call who, Captain Cook? Asked Mrs. Popper, who had come in so quietly that none of them had heard her. Why, the penguin, said Mr. Popper. I was just saying, he went on, as Mrs. Popper sat down suddenly on the floor to recover from her surprise, that we'd name him after Captain Cook. He was a famous English explorer who lived about the time of the American Revolution. He sailed all over where no one had ever been before. He didn't actually get to the South Pole, of course, but he made a lot of important scientific discoveries about the Antarctic regions. He was a brave man and a kind leader, so I think Captain Cook would be a very suitable name for our penguin here. Well, I never, said Mrs. Popper. Gork, said Captain Cook, suddenly getting lively again. With a flap of his flippers, he jumped from the tub to the washstand and stood there for a minute surveying the floor. Then he jumped down, walked over to Mrs. Popper, and began to peck her ankle. Stop him, Papa, screamed Mrs. Popper, retreating into the hallway with Captain Cook after her, and Mr. Popper and the children following. In the living room, she paused. So did Captain Cook, for he was delighted with the room. Now a penguin may look very strange in a living room, but a living room looks very strange to a penguin. Even Mrs. Popper had to smile as they watched Captain Cook, with the light of curiosity in his excited circular eyes, and his black tailcoat dragging pompously behind his little pinkish feet, strut from one upholstered chair to another, pecking at each other to see what it was made of. Then he turned suddenly and marched out to the kitchen. Maybe he's hungry, said Janie. Captain Cook immediately marched up to the refrigerator. Gork, he inquired, turning to slant his head wisely at Mrs. Popper and looking at her pleadingly with his right eye. He certainly is cute, she said. I guess I'll have to forgive him for biting my ankle. He probably only did it out of curiosity. Anyway, he's a nice-looking bird. Ork, repeated the penguin, nibbling at the metal handle of the refrigerator door with his upstretched beak. Mr. Popper opened the door for him, and Captain Cook stood very high and leaned his sleek black head back so that he could see inside. Now that Mr. Popper's work was over for the winter, the icebox was not quite so full as usual, but the penguin did not know that. What do you suppose he likes to eat? Asked Mrs. Popper. Let's see, Mr. Popper, as he removed all the food and set it onto the kitchen table. Now then, Captain Cook, take a look. The penguin jumped onto the chair and from there onto the edge of the table, flapping his flippers again to recover his balance. Then he walked solemnly around the table and between the dishes of food, inspecting everything with the greatest interest, though he touched nothing. Finally, he stood very erect, raised his beak to the point of the ceiling, and made a loud, almost purring sound. Or, he trilled. I guess he found something that he liked. What do you think it is, Izzy? A girl of many words. That's a penguin's way of saying how pleased it is, said Mr. Popper, who had read about it in his Antarctic books. Apparently, however, what Captain Hook wanted to show was that he was pleased with their kindness rather than their food. For now, to their surprise, he jumped down and walked into the dining room. I know, said Mr. Popper, we ought to have some food for him. Canned shrimps or something. Or maybe he isn't hungry yet. I've read that penguins can go for a month without food. Mama, Papa, called Bill, come see what Captain Cook has done. Uh-oh. Captain Cook had done it all right. He had discovered the bowl of goldfish on the dining room window. Uh-oh. By the time Mrs. Popper reached over to lift him away, he had already swallowed the last of the goldfish. Making a connection, kind of like what Kitty tries to do with Bryce Harper in our fishbowl. By the time Mr. Popper reached over to lift him away, he had already swallowed the last goldfish. Bad penguin, reproved Mrs. Popper, glaring down at Captain Hook. Captain Hook squatted guiltily on the carpet and tried to make himself look small. He knows he's done wrong, said Mr. Popper. Isn't he smart? Maybe we can train him, said Mrs. Popper. Bad, naughty captain, she said to the penguin in a loud voice. Bad to eat the goldfish. And she spanked him on his round black head. Before she could do that again, Captain Cook hastily waddled out of the kitchen. There the Poppers found him trying to hide in the still open refrigerator. He was squatted under the ice cube coils, under which he could barely squeeze sitting down. His round, white-circled eyes looked out at them mysteriously from the dimness of the inside of the box. I think that's about the right temperature for him at that, said Mr. Popper. We could let him sleep there at night. But where I put the food, asked Mrs. Popper. Oh, I guess we can get another icebox for the food, said Mr. Popper. Look, said Janie, he's gone to sleep. Mr. Popper turned the cold control switch to its coldest so that Captain Cook could sleep more comfortably. Then he left the door ajar so that the penguin would have plenty of fresh air to breathe. What do you think ajar means, Izzy? Let's see if there's any context clues to figure that word out. Then he left the door ajar so that the penguin would have plenty of fresh air to breathe. So I see an example context clue. So he left the door open for fresh air to breathe. So ajar must mean open. Right, good. Tomorrow, I will have the icebox service department send a man out to bore some holes in the door for air, he said. And then he can put a handle on the inside of the door so that Captain Cook can go in out of his refrigerator as he pleases. Well, dear me, I never thought we would have a penguin for a pet, said Mrs. Popper. Still, he behaves pretty well on the whole, and he is so nice and clean that perhaps he will be a good example to you and the children. And now, I declare, we must get busy. We haven't done anything but watch that bird. Papa, will you just help me to set the beans on the table, please? Just a minute, answered Mr. Popper. I just happened to think that Captain Cook will not feel right on the floor of that icebox. Penguins make their nests of pebbles and stones. So I will just make some ice cubes out of the tray and put them under him. That way he will be more comfortable. And that's the end of chapter 4. So now we have some interesting personalities of Captain Cook. We now know that Captain Cook the penguin is intelligent, pretty smart, probably can be trained, likes to sleep in the icebox or the freezer. ate the goldfish in the bowl, so he's naughty at times too. But he probably didn't know that that's something that they can't do. Hi, Kitty. What are you doing today? And then Izzy has the. Is this the San Diego Zoo?
No.
Oops. What did I do?
It's the. Let me think.
Point Pleasant Beach. Jenkins Aquarium Penguin Cam.
There we go.
Okay.
They're moving.
Jenkins Aquarium.
Let me see. So, penguin cams. There's definitely some penguin cams around. If you search live penguin cams, certain zoos and aquariums have them. So you could always watch them when you feel bored. It could be something that you guys do. And then your exit ticket for today, after you listen to my read aloud, is going to be, what would you do if you had a penguin as a pet? So basically, I want you to put your shoes in Mr. Popper's shoes, and I want you to tell me, what would you do if a penguin showed up at your door and you had to basically take care of him or her? So I'm going to post that as your exit ticket, and then I want you to complete that for today or tomorrow. I'm not going to have to give you a lot of work today, so if you don't get to it today, that's fine, but I would like you to kind of tell me. And Kitty, you have to get off of my table. She wants to be in my video. I want you to kind of tell me what would happen at your house if a penguin showed up at your door. All right. A lot of you are getting to work and doing your work today, which is great. If you have any questions, let me know on Google Classroom page, and I will try and get to them as quickly as possible. So again, for today, just to go over one more time, your iReady lesson on scientific texts, your iReady path, reading 15 to 30 minutes, and your summary on your Google Classroom doc page. You have a Nearpod lesson on text structure, and I know that you could not do the collaboration on the Nearpod lesson. I didn't push a button that allowed you to collaborate, so that's something that for the next Nearpod lesson it'll be activated. And then for social studies, Mrs. Colonna's class, you have a brain pop on Mount Everest. 3 things you have to do for that: movie, quiz, and the worksheets. And that is it. That is your work for me for today for science, or for social studies and ELA. And then make sure you go to Mrs. Colonna's page and do her assignments for math, and also do her science lesson for my homework. Okay, hope everybody has a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.